Yeah. In your own words, you've been wanting independence from Denmark for 300 years. How's that working out for you? It's not. And now we have a shift in global initiatives and powers in the region. You can't do anything to defend yourself. Denmark cannot do anything to defend you. It's up to the United States of America. End of story.
What is going on, everybody? Lucas here, and listen. You need to clear your schedule for this one because what you are about to watch is one of the most satisfying slow-motion public collapses I have seen in a long time. A MAGA congressman walked onto international television thinking he was about to sell the world on Trump's Greenland takeover fantasy, and instead got laughed at by an entire studio panel, while the Greenlandic minister calmly destroyed every single argument he made with patience, facts, and quiet dignity. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up because on Lucas Speaks, we do not miss moments like this. Now let's get into it.
How are you and fellow Greenlanders feeling tonight?
Well, we are bewildered and have been so since New Year's Eve, I would say. This is an entirely new situation where an ally is threatening to annex or even occupy us.
Are people preparing for some kind of military invasion in practical terms?
Well, people are scared and people are preparing themselves in the ways they can.
Like what?
But of course, we're not aiming at a military invasion.
No, you're hoping that won't happen, of course. But are people stocking up on food, for example?
Well, I've been hearing that some of the stores have been running out of some materials and other, but I think right now we're just trying to make sense of the news of the world and figuring out what is it that the states want with us. We need some clarity in these coming days, and we need to deepen the dialogue that we have already started.
Congressman, you've just heard the minister. People there are scared and potentially preparing for your democratic country to take their democratic country by military force, a NATO ally, a sovereign country. That's outrageous, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think the idea that the United States would take Greenland by force is absolutely absurd, and quite frankly, it's a talking point from globalists who are trying to sound an alarm. Let's be honest, the GDP of Greenland is roughly 3.3 billion.
Sure, and if I may, when Donald Trump...
I'll finish, 3.3 billion is, and yet, China has invested $450 billion into the Arctic Sea in just a 5-year period from 2012 to 2017. So if you're in Greenland and you are alarmed, it should be the buildup of resources by China in the region. And you can look at other countries that they've come into, whether it's the Belt and Road Initiative, or if you look at, their Thailand, Taiwan, Hong Kong, etc. So look, at the end of the day, the United States of America protects the Western Hemisphere to include Greenland, and we are looking to have a productive dialogue. End of story.
Donald Trump has had multiple... Of course, sorry, Minister, do come back. Do talk to our congressman.
Yeah, I just want to say that in Greenland we do understand that we are a part of the American national security sphere. We get this. What I want to know is, by your standards, what is your plan and your proposal? Leave the people of Greenland. And we do not want to be Americans, and we have been quite clear about that. We do want collaboration and deepen our partnership and relationship. But I just must ask you, what value do you put on our culture and our right to decide what happens with us in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a valid question. I think as we look, we're entering into a new era. When you look how, open the Arctic Sea is, the Greenland Sea there, the Arctic Ocean, Greenland Sea. And so you look at Russia has, 8 nuclear icebreakers deployed. China has 5. Denmark can't keep pace with that. And so as you have increasing resources by adversaries of the West, and that would include Greenland, you're going to need this relationship with the United States of America. So whether it's the Golden Dome, whether it's trade, and look, there's trillions of dollars in resources there in Greenland for the Greenlanders, for the people. Denmark has not done anything, quite frankly, to capitalize on that for your people, for your country. The United States can certainly do that, and it's a win-win for the Greenlanders.
And do you want to answer the minister's question, which is what value do you put on what the people of Greenland want?
Absolutely. I think if you had a referendum today to the folks of Greenland, they would overwhelmingly want independence from Denmark, and they would overwhelmingly want a closer relationship with the United States of America.
I need to rebuke that. There was a survey last year that showed overwhelming solidarity within the kingdom. Of course, we want more self-determination, but we want it within the realm of the Kingdom of Denmark, and I think that should be respected. We have been working towards more autonomy for 300 years with Denmark, and I think we're making progress in many ways. But this is a decision for Greenland and Denmark, a conversation we need to have amongst us. And I think that should be respected. I think the people of Greenland has clearly stated they do not want to be Americans. They want collaboration. And your point about the need to ramp up monitoring and presence in the Arctic, we are in agreement with this. This is one of the reasons why NATO was formed. It was to pull together the forces of many countries and the capacities and competences. So I think that there's ample opportunities to find solutions within existing frameworks, without harming my culture or my country.
Well, in your own words, you've been wanting independence from Denmark for 300 years. How's that working out for you? It's not. And now we have a shift in global initiatives and powers in the region. You can't do anything to defend yourself. Denmark cannot do anything to defend you. It's up to the United States of America. End of story. And unless you're capable, which you are not, of doing that, again, let me go back to the data. 3.3 billion is your GDP. China has already invested over $500 billion into the region, and that number is only growing day by day, and we see these continued incursions. And look, if there's going to be an attack on the Western Hemisphere, it's going to be from that sphere, and the United States of America, quite frankly, is going to have to make, and I think this is going to be a mutually beneficial relationship, but it's going to have to become a protectorate of the United States. And quite frankly, I think the people of Alberta would agree with that sentiment, that they would prefer not to be a part of Canada and be a part of the United States, because we are winning day in and day out. And the idea of NATO being able to defend anyone, anywhere, is nonsense without the United States of America. They can't defend their own cities from the current invasion that's taking place from West Africa. They certainly can't do it from Russia or China.
I wonder if I could ask you, Minister, is Denmark doing enough? Is NATO doing enough to protect Greenland?
Well, we've been asking for years that we are perfectly inviting NATO countries and Denmark to ramp up the monitoring of the Arctic. We see a lot of purpose in that, not only for military purposes, but also dual use. So for us, this would be very acceptable, and we think it makes a lot of sense. So I think we can figure something out together, and I still believe in the path of dialogue. What we don't appreciate is the idea of being sold and bought like a commodity. But we do want to engage in the discussions about more national security for the U.S., which we appreciate and understand.
But it sounds like you've been asking
for mineral resources to be harvested.
Ah, well, that's interesting, because you are the Minister for Natural Resources. How much do you think that is relevant to the U.S. leader?
Well, I think there's more than one narrative at play, and I think there's more than one truth. And I think we all need to find our way in that complexity. I don't think there's a single answer to this question. I think it can have to do with national security, of course, with mineral access, and maybe also with expansionism.
Do you accept that, Congressman Ogles? It's to do with US expansionism?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think you have to look at the state of play on the global map today, that it's not NATO that's investing in the Arctic Ocean or the Greenland Sea or in the territory that is Greenland, but it's China and Russia. And unfortunately, we cannot sit idly by and allow that to happen. So as far as Greenland goes, NATO is defunct. It has not had a role. The handful of troops that they're sending there, it's symbolic, and I totally understand why Macron or some of the other leaders were going to want to stand up at Davos and come across as strong in their own roles. I get that and understand that. But at the end of the day, when you look at global peace, the world looks to the United States of America. And what I'm telling you, what the president is telling you, is that Greenland is an integral part of our security and global security, and the time for talk is over. We have to move forward. The clock is ticking. We continue to see China. We continue to see Russia advancing and investing in the region when no one else is, and no one but the United States has the capability or the resources to push back and fight this fight.
And final word to you, Minister, in response to the Congressman, and also your message to Donald Trump, who will be addressing Davos tomorrow.
Well, one thing I find baffling is I hear this about the need to control Greenland and own Greenland in terms of making sure that the U.S. is safe and sound. I just don't know how my freedom plays into all of this and how the freedom of my people plays into all of this. I think if you talk about freedom and security, that should extend to us as well, us being an ally, Denmark being an ally.
Thank you, both of you, and thank you for your patience as well.
So now that you have seen exactly what happened in that room, let us talk about what this debate actually revealed. Because what you just watched was not simply a congressman having a bad television appearance. What you watched was the entire philosophical foundation of MAGA foreign policy put on international display and collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions in front of people who were not willing to pretend otherwise. Let us start with the most important thing that happened in that entire exchange. And it was not the laughter, though we will get to that. It was the moment the Greenlandic minister asked one simple question. What value do you put on the culture and the right of the people of Greenland to decide their own future? That is not a complicated question. That is not a gotcha. That is the most fundamental question that any representative of a democratic nation should be able to answer without hesitation. And Congressman Ogles could not answer it. He pivoted to China. He pivoted to Russia. He pivoted to icebreakers and GDP figures and Arctic Sea investment data. He said everything except the one thing that question required, that the people of Greenland matter, that their wishes matter, that their sovereignty matters, that their culture matters. The fact that he could not say those words, that every attempt to get him to acknowledge the basic human dignity and democratic rights of 56,000 people ended in a subject change, tells you everything about what this administration actually means when it talks about freedom and democracy. It means freedom and democracy for Americans. Everyone else gets end of story. Now let us talk about the GDP obsession, because this man said 3.3 billion 3 times, like it was a magic spell that dissolved Greenland's right to exist as a sovereign people. The argument being made, and let us state it plainly so everyone understands exactly what is being said, is that because Greenland's economy is smaller than America's, Greenland does not get a meaningful say in its own future. That is not a foreign policy argument. That is a colonial argument. That is the exact same logic that European empires used for centuries to justify taking land from people who could not militarily resist them. We are stronger. We are richer. We know better. End of story. The fact that this argument is being made in 2026 by a sitting United States congressman about a NATO ally, a democratic nation whose people have been explicitly, repeatedly, publicly clear with that they do not want to be American, should alarm every person who took seriously this country's stated commitment to democratic values and national self-determination. And the Greenlandic minister sat there and absorbed it with a composure and a grace that frankly the congressman did not deserve, and then calmly pointed out that a survey showed 85% of Greenlanders oppose becoming part of the United States, and only 6% support it. His response to those numbers was to say the leadership of Greenland does not want a referendum, as if the solution to a population not wanting what you are selling is to prevent them from voting on it. That is not democracy. That is the language of occupation dressed up in the rhetoric of protection. And then there is the West Africa moment. And we need to sit with this for a second because it deserves its full weight. This man on international television, in front of defense correspondents and foreign policy journalists, claimed that European nations are being invaded by West Africa, not metaphorically. Not as a reference to migration policy. He said it as a geopolitical statement about military threat. And the entire studio laughed, not because they were being rude, not because they were biased against Republicans, but because what he said was so divorced from geographic and military reality that laughter was the only honest response available to people who actually know what they are talking about. Sam Kiley, a veteran defense and foreign correspondent who has spent significant portions of his career in West Africa, could not maintain composure because the statement was not a debatable position. It was not a fringe interpretation of contested data. It was geographically illiterate nonsense stated with complete confidence. And that moment, that involuntary laughter from a room full of serious people, is the sound of the emperor having no clothes. MAGA foreign policy rhetoric works in sealed environments where everyone agrees to treat wild claims as serious arguments. It does not survive contact with people who have actually been to the places being discussed. Let us also address the contradiction at the absolute heart of this entire argument, because it needs to be named clearly. The congressman spent the entire debate warning about Russian and Chinese aggression, expansion, and investment in the Arctic as justification for American control of Greenland. And then the host pointed out that Donald Trump appears to be good friends with Vladimir Putin. The same Vladimir Putin whose country has 8 nuclear icebreakers deployed in the Arctic, whose military is actively fighting a war against a democratic European nation, and whose aggression the United States has historically been the primary counterforce against. The Trump administration has withdrawn support from Ukraine. It has weakened NATO at the moment NATO is most vulnerable. It has treated democratic allies with more hostility than it treats authoritarian adversaries. So the argument that America needs Greenland to protect the Western Hemisphere from Russia falls apart the moment you acknowledge that the administration making that argument has done more to strengthen Russia's strategic position in Europe than any American administration in modern history. You cannot simultaneously argue that Russian aggression is the existential threat requiring American control of Greenland, while your president is calling Putin a friend and abandoning the country that is literally fighting Russian tanks on European soil. Those two positions cannot coexist honestly, and the fact that nobody in the MAGA media ecosystem is required to reconcile them is a failure of accountability that this channel will keep calling out. Here is what this moment ultimately comes down to. The Greenlandic minister said something near the end of that exchange that should be quoted and remembered. She said she finds it baffling that when people talk about controlling Greenland for freedom and security, nobody explains how her freedom plays into all of that, how the freedom of her people plays into all of that. She said, if you talk about freedom and security, that should extend to us as well. That is not a radical statement. That is the most basic application of the democratic values America claims to stand for. And the congressman had no answer to it, because there is no answer that is both honest and consistent with what the Trump administration is actually doing. The freedom they're talking about is American freedom, American security, American strategic interest. Everyone else's freedom is negotiable. Everyone else's sovereignty is conditional. Everyone else gets end of story. Democrats stand for something different. Democrats stand for a foreign policy grounded in genuine respect for democratic sovereignty, for international law, for the principle that the size of your economy does not determine the value of your voice. That is not weakness. That is the actual meaning of the values this country has spent generations claiming to represent. And Lucas Speaks will keep saying that every single video. If this is the kind of accountability that you want to see more of, hit that like button right now, share this video, and subscribe to Lucas Speaks because we are just getting started.